last list that I'm going to be doing for 2017. Let's do it. Hi everyone, so this is the last list that I will be doing in terms of my music reviews for 2017. This is every album that I reviewed in 2017, organized by the ratings that I gave them. My rating scale is excellent, good, okay, bad, or awful. So I'm just going to be going from worst rating to best rating. This isn't a comprehensive worst to best albums. It's just every rating that I gave. So like the chronological order of every awful album, every bad, every okay, every good, every excellent. So it's not a definitive worst to best list. It's just every album that I got to review this year in like a chronology. Also, this isn't a best of 2017 list or a worst of 2017 list because some of these albums and mixtapes and stuff go all the way back to 2011. This is just everything I reviewed this year. And again, as I've said before in my last few lists, this list is my opinion. If you disagree, it's fine. You can just leave a thoughtful comment, start a discussion. And who's texting me? So if you disagree, that's totally fine. Just don't get angry about it. So I have every album loaded up on my Google Docs. So let us get started with the awful albums. But first, this is one that I didn't review this year, but I want to give a shout out to Jake Paul's Litmus. I lost brain cells listening to this thing. Only thing I even liked on it was Slim Jimmy's verse on Litmus. Otherwise, everything else was terrible. Alright, so starting off with the awful albums I reviewed this year. The first awful that I gave out was to A$AP Mob's Cozy Tapes Volume 2, Too Cozy, a complete clunker of an album that couldn't make up for its unoriginality with any fun or energy, and I really can't recommend listening to this whatsoever. The second awful that I gave out this year was to Maroon 5 with Red Pill Blues. Even if we disregard the awful cover and the fact that Maroon 5 themselves regretted even calling this Red Pill Blues, it was just generic, boring, sleep-inducing pop music. If you like pop music that puts you to sleep, this is great for you. If not, then just walk away. The last awful album that I gave this year, and probably the worst thing I reviewed this year other than Litmus, was Jaden Smith's new album, Sire, an album that actually legitimately made me physically ill as I was listening to it. I started getting a stomachache, I'm not even gonna lie. I feel like a lot of it just amounted to really repetitive, bland, lackluster, fake, deep music, and all in all, I don't think it deserves your time whatsoever. I think I even put in my review that if you happen to come in contact with the album at a store, report it to the people that work there because they're selling something really toxic and deadly on their shelves. I don't know. Alright, moving on to the bad albums. These weren't ear-piercingly awful, and they may have had one or two tracks I still enjoy, but weren't all that great. I gave 5 bads this year. I'm a generally kind of nice music critic. I don't demand too much. Just be nice on my ears and stuff and have some energy and some fun. These albums just unfortunately didn't. Starting off with the first bad that I gave out this year, Macklemore's latest album, Gemini, his first solo album in 12 years, that for me was just too formulaic and too meh all around. Wasn't cringeworthy, wasn't ear-piercingly awful, but I think if I forget every track that I just listened to right after doing the review, that's not a very good thing. Number 2, the second album I gave a bad to this year, and an album that really disappointed me because I really like this artist a lot, Shania Twain's Now. I feel like, after 15 years since Up, which I really, really enjoyed, I feel like Shania Twain was stuck at a bit of a crossroads with this record where she couldn't decide if she wanted to modernize her sound or stick to what made her popular, and as a result, it just fell flat for me. There's really few memorable tracks on this thing, and it's a shame. The third album I gave a bad rating to this year, and I think some people might even ask why I didn't give it an awful, is Designer's New English mixtape. This was one that I just reviewed because I got bored one day, and it is really lackluster, really tacky and unfinished and bland and repetitive. I don't think it's awful because there were a few tracks that I did kind of enjoy, or rather a few concepts that I enjoyed, and it definitely felt like there was potential on this thing, but it just wasn't really fully realized. Hopefully, if Designer does come back with his new album, which I think considering that his popularity has fallen, it might be a bit too late. Hopefully, it's stronger than whatever this was. Moving on to the fourth bad rating that I gave this year, one of the biggest albums of the year, Taylor Swift's Reputation. This album to me felt like change for the sake of change and not the natural evolution of the artist in question. And lyrically, it was even worse. I was cracking up at Taylor's blatant lack of subtlety on some tracks. And, you know, I say this about the record. At best, it's a slightly interesting conversation starter about Taylor Swift's standing with the media and with Kim and Kanye West. At worst, it's petty drama for the sake of petty drama. Taylor, I'm sorry, but as a critic, I would like to be excluded from your narrative. Thank you. And then the last bad rating that I gave this year was to Nav and Metro Boomin on their collaboration mixtape, Perfect Timing. In this one, Nav followed up on his self-titled debut record, which I will talk about later on, with a series of tracks that just end up talking about the same thing, following the exact same flow, and almost sounding the exact same. There are definitely some highlights on this thing, some tracks I did enjoy, and I think Metro Boomin's production on this is not bad, but I feel like the man that calls himself the Brown Boy definitely slumped a bit on this one, especially compared to his other EXO brethren and their latest projects. Okay, now moving on to the OK albums. I definitely gave quite a few OKs. Looking through my list, I gave 14 OK ratings this year. So that should tell you that, you know, it takes a lot for me to really dislike an album. Starting off, the first OK that I gave out, that was to Lil Uzi Vert's debut record, Love Is Rage 2, which hit some of his highest highs for me, but also his lowest lows. For every The Way Life Goes and Dark Queen that I really enjoyed, there was a 444 plus 222 that I just wanted to blank out of my memory forever. I like Uzi's style of music, how he can hide some really dark lyrics behind some really upbeat, catchy productions, but unfortunately on this record, he was just a bit too inconsistent with it. Moving on to the second OK rating that I gave this year, it was to Fifth Harmony's self-titled album. Ultimately, this record had a few tracks that I did enjoy and continued to listen to throughout the year, but my big problem with it is that it was just very standard. I went into it really interested because it was their first record without Camila Cabello, but I walked out just thinking to myself, wow, Camila's departure meant nothing to the group. They didn't sound any different without her than they did with her. Few tracks I did enjoy, like I said, but ultimately I feel like this is definitely just for the hardcore fans. Next up, the third and fourth, because this is the same artist, The Weeknd, with his debut mixtape House of Balloons and his debut album Kissland. Two projects I know a lot of people loved that I really wasn't all that crazy about. House of Balloons had a few tracks that really grew on me throughout the year that I did enjoy, but it was just a bit too long and a bit too slow for me, and Kissland, it just lacked the energy, the excitement, and the fun of some of his better records. And that's just why I wasn't all that crazy about it. I'm sorry. Moving right along to the next OK album that I reviewed this year, we have Jack Johnson's All the Light Above It 2, another record that started pretty solid and had a nice sound to it, but every track just kind of meshed together after a while, and I think that that isn't a problem if you're a huge Jack Johnson fan, but for me, it's just like it gets boring after a while. Moving right along, we have Fergie's Double Duchess, her first album in 11 years that really doesn't quite know what it wants to be. It blends some of her solid old school style with some new school rap that feels like discount Nicki Minaj, Iggy Azalea, Cardi B, or any female rapper that became big in the 2010s decade. So overall, I think there is some fun to be had with this record, but there's also some really terrible tracks on this thing. Milk Money. Sorry, had something stuck in my throat. Moving right along to the next OK mixtape, we have Lil Pump's self-titled tape. I know this is a tape that you really can't take seriously, and at face value, that's kind of the point. But, you know, it's definitely a fun tape, and there is a certain appeal to it. I feel like there is an audience for this kind of tape. It's not for me, but, you know, there are a few tracks I did nod my head to and enjoy, and I feel like there is some solid enjoyment for others on this tape. Moving right along, an album that I know a lot of people hated, but I didn't hate nearly as much, and that's Charlie Puth's 9-Track Mind. I felt like it, for the most part, just couldn't help but feel like it had been done far better by other artists, but there were still tracks on this record that I took away and still enjoyed and not in my head too overall. So it wasn't all doom and gloom for me. I see why people didn't like it, but for me, I had fun with it. After that, another okay album is Ty Dolla $ign's Beach House 3, an album that again struggled with inconsistency, that had some really memorable tracks that might even be some of Ty's best, but some really unremarkable, not so memorable tracks, and some really boring interludes that could have just been tacked on to other songs or made into their own. So as it is, there is fun to be had with his music, just not all of it. Moving along, another album that kind of got hated in some circles. Chris Brown's Heartbreak on a Full Moon, the 45-track, 2.5-hour marathon that I cannot recommend you listen to in its entirety, especially because a lot of the songs just kind of sound the same and talk about the same thing. But I'm not gonna lie, there were some tracks on this thing that I did really, really like and continue to listen to throughout the year. I think the 45-track thing was kind of just an excuse to get people talking about what would have been two otherwise average albums, but again, there were some good tracks that I did enjoy on this thing. It's just I can't recommend listening to it in its entirety. Moving along, one of the few rock albums I reviewed this year, one that, just wasn't quite for me. Foo Fighters' latest album, Concrete and Gold. Some strong instrumentals on this thing, a nice subtle political edge to it, but just hard rock music isn't for me, and I think this was one of the albums that really taught me to stay in my lane when it comes to these reviews. Definitely, if you are a Foo Fighters fan, I feel like you'll love it. It's just nothing I wanted to replay. After that, another one of the more kind of hated albums of the year, Eminem's latest record, Revival. A rare case where I felt like the lead artist wasn't really the problem with the record. Honestly, I think Eminem's performance throughout a lot of these songs was fine. It was mostly the terrible production and awful, lazy instrumental tracks on this thing that really did it for me. And a lot of the features were really hit or miss. While I actually personally enjoyed Ed Sheeran and Beyonce on some of the tracks on this thing, what the hell is X Ambassadors doing here? So, few solid tracks on this thing, but otherwise definitely one of M's weaker projects. Moving on, getting back to Nav, we have his self-titled debut mixtape, which sticks too far into his comfort zone, and overall the songs just kind of end up meshing together and sounding ordinary after a while. A few solid tracks that I did continue to enjoy, but having some really ordinary sounding tracks throughout a whole tape, some of which have some really cringe-inducing lyrics, didn't really do many favors for the brown boy, hoping he can bounce back next year. And with guys like The Weeknd in his corner, hopefully that'll happen. And then last of the okay albums, we have Drake's More Life, an overly long playlist of generally so-so tracks for me. While there were some highlights that I did enjoy, it kind of felt like this project of B-sides was just an exercise in gimmicky marketing, an attempt for Drake to just sell something with his face. And honestly, I think it's strange that he had to release a holdover project like this after Views, because Views wasn't even a year old when this came out. What is he holding people over for? I couldn't even take a guess, but all in all, it was not one of Drake's stronger projects. A few solid tracks that I did enjoy, but otherwise, this kind of didn't even need to exist. Alright, moving on to the good albums that I reviewed this year. The albums that may have had a few flaws, but albums that I still did enjoy and come back to quite a bit throughout the year. Starting off, again, we're talking about The Weeknd here. His second mixtape, Thursday. A tape that definitely had some of the same problems as House of Balloons, but overall it was a bit tighter, cleaner, more fun to listen to, had a few more memorable tracks on it. It was definitely more enjoyable for me than House of Balloons. Moving right along, an album that some people might wonder why I didn't give it an excellent. That is Kesha's latest album, Rainbow. I feel like this album didn't end as well as it started for me. Some of the last few tracks weren't as strong, but it's an album that I come back to more and more and really love. The strong tracks on this thing are some of Kesha's absolute best, and it makes me happy to see that she's back and that she's creating some legitimately strong music. I think some of the stuff she has on this record is some of her absolute best material to date, and it makes me happy to see her back and really just kind of flipping off Dr. Luke and keeping that don't give a fuck attitude that she usually had before. It's a change in her style of music, but it also feels just like her. So overall, it's an album I can definitely applaud. Moving along, 2 records from the same artist here, so I'll just put them both right here. And this is one that might get me a few disagreements. We have Rae Sremmurd with their 2 projects, Shrem Life and Shrem Life 2. 2 albums that definitely grew on me throughout the year. Originally, I didn't take these guys all that seriously, but after a while, you know, the natural Shrem Life effect came in. I didn't love these at first, but after hearing it a few more times, it became fun. Some fun little turn-up shit that, you know, it's not all that deep. It's not a new classic, and both albums are a bit inconsistent. There are definitely a few low points on both of them, but they're still really fun. I still enjoyed them both and definitely came back to them quite a bit throughout the year. Moving right along, we have Miley Cyrus's latest album, Younger Now, an album that returned to her roots and was overall pretty sweet, fun, enjoyable stuff. Didn't really change my thoughts on country music and didn't really turn me into a huge Miley fan, but it was nice to see Miley doing something a bit more grounded and personal, especially after Bangers and then whatever the hell that 2015 album was. And, you know, it was a nice album. It was fun. I enjoyed it. A couple tracks I definitely came back to and really appreciated throughout the year. Definitely a pretty enjoyable record. Moving on to the next good album, we have Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour. I reviewed this in preparation for his latest album, The Thrill of It All. And there were definitely a few tracks I wasn't all that great about. Some of them were a bit boring, and some of the non-singles were not as strong. But, you know, it definitely holds up 3 years later. His vocals were really strong. His performances throughout these songs are great. He himself was able to really keep the record afloat with his vocals, I would say. After that, we have another album that I gave a good rating to, that is Niall Horan with Flicker, an album that really kind of, to me, felt the same as any other One Direction album in that I'm not really all that crazy about it, but I can appreciate it from afar, and much like 1D, it's not something I completely fawned over and thought was the greatest thing in the world. There were definitely some really fun takeaway tracks on this thing that I still listen to this day. It was simple, but it was sweet, and I had a lot of fun with it. After that, one of the biggest roller coaster albums that I reviewed, but one that I still enjoyed, that was the 2016 Kanye West album, The Life of Pablo. This was sold as a really messy, tacky, kind of unfinished conceptual album, and I kind of joke about it a lot in that it's so roller coaster-ish. 1 minute Kanye's talking about a god dream and being on an ultralight beam, and the next minute he wishes that his dick had GoPro so he can rewatch his sex in slow motion. But, you know, there were some good jams on this thing. I definitely came back to it quite a bit and really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's one of his strongest works because I haven't reviewed his entire discography, but I did enjoy it for what it was. And then the last good album that I reviewed this year, the last one that I gave a good rating to, was Tyler, the Creator's latest album, Flower Boy. This was one that originally wasn't on my radar, but a friend of mine in school suggested it. And, you know, it's not really for me. It's not my kind of music, but it's something that I can definitely appreciate from afar. I like Tyler's very introspective look at himself on this record. I thought he definitely proved to be a really strong lyricist with some great flows throughout this thing. And even if it's something I won't listen to on an everyday basis, it's something I can appreciate, and I'm glad it exists. It's definitely something that has an audience, and for what it was, I had some fun with it. Even if Tyler kind of, you know, he talks about this in one of the tracks, but even if it might be a little too weird for the masses like he says, it's still an enjoyable record. I did have a lot of fun with it. Alright, and now we move on to the excellent albums. These are all the albums I gave an excellent rating to this year, and, well, let's just jump right in, shall we? Starting off with one of the first albums that I did review this year, and one of my favorite albums of the year, Kendrick Lamar's Damn. And we'll talk a little bit more about Kendrick later in this video, but this record was one that got better with more listens for me. I loved it at first listen, but as I continued to listen to it, I was like, wow, Kendrick is great. He's got a lot of really memorable, strong tracks on this thing. He's a great lyricist, a great rapper. He's great with concepts, and he does a really fantastic job on this record. I really enjoyed it. Next up, we have 3 projects from one of my favorite artists, The Weeknd, that got excellence this year. Starting off with his final mixtape, Echoes of Silence, and continuing with his most recent albums, Beauty Behind the Madness and Starboy. Echoes of Silence was a tape that really kind of ironed out all of the problems that I had with his first 2 tapes, and it was definitely his best, most enjoyable, most fun mixtape out of the original trilogy. Beauty Behind the Madness, even if, he became a bit more poppy like some of his fans say, I think that his songs were full of great energy and they still felt like him. It still felt like a natural evolution to his music, as did Starboy. Starboy didn't really change up too much, but it did feel like it was trending a little bit different from Beauty Behind the Madness, and it still felt really fun and enjoyable for me. Moving right along, an album that I'm ashamed I didn't listen to sooner, that is Bruno Mars's 24 Karat Magic, an album that reminds us that he can handle a lot of different musical styles and that he can have a lot of fun and create some really memorable throwback tracks. I really enjoyed this record, and it was one of those things where I kind of accidentally listened to at least one song from it every day because it was just that fun to me. I really liked it. After that, we have the first streaming-only project to win a Grammy. That is Chance the Rapper's Coloring Book, which for me felt a bit different from a lot of rap music in that it felt more spiritual and soulful, and it was really fun. It had a lot of really great tracks. I love Chance's performances throughout this album, and there were a lot of songs I really just kept coming back to and really enjoying. I liked this one a lot, and I think Chance really put in his heart on this one. It's definitely a really strong project, and now it made me really want to go back and listen to some of his other projects. It made me a Chance fan, I'll put it to you like that. After that, a small EP that I could give a shout out to, we have Rebecca Black with Rebel, a short EP, only 6 tracks, but it proved to me that Rebecca Black is much better than just being that girl who sang Friday. I know that she does a lot of covers on YouTube and she does a great job with them, but this really proved to me that she could be a strong artist and legitimate musician on her own. And I had a lot of fun with the tracks on here. Definitely really memorable, really enjoyable. Definitely kept coming back to a lot of these. After that, another album I missed in 2016, Beyonce's Lemonade. I shouldn't really need to say much about this because I can't really add much to the conversation that hasn't been said. But again, she reminds us on this that she is one of the best in the business as a vocalist, lyricist, conceptualist, and as someone that can handle just a lot of different musical styles. It's not easy to find this album because it's really only on Tidal. I had to break out some superpowers to even find it somewhere for free without having to, pirate or anything like that. But, if you can find it, I feel like you'll really enjoy it. After that, an album that just kind of stuck with me throughout the year, had some really fun tracks that I really enjoyed. That is Demi Lovato's Tell Me You Love Me. I love her vocals throughout a lot of the songs on the album. I like the different subject matters that she tackles and the way that she goes about talking about different things. Some great lyrics, and a lot of the tracks on here are really fun. She definitely has a lot of fun with this album. It felt like it was from the heart, but also really just enjoyable, let loose kind of music. And I really liked it. So good job, Demi. And since you want me to tell you this, I love you. Moving on, 3 albums from the same artist. This is one of the ones that will probably get me a bit of controversy for sure. That is Ed Sheeran's trio of albums, plus Multiply and Divide. I don't think I really need to say much. I like Ed Sheeran a lot. His music is stuff that's nice on my ears. It's really fun to listen to sing along to, and that's all I've got to say. Moving right along, we have Poppy with her latest album, Poppy.Computer. The abstract YouTube video creator extraordinaire takes the idea of soulless bubblegum pop and makes it great. It makes it memorable, fun to listen to, talks about some really interesting things with her lyrics, and it's a really enjoyable album that I kept coming back to. Same goes with the next excellent album on this list, Pink with Beautiful Trauma. After 5 years, her new album reminds us why she stayed around for so long, with some brilliant vocals, great lyricism, punchy, fun instrumental tracks, and just enjoyable songs. I feel like this reminds us that she's still got it. Next on the list, we have Alessia Cara's Know It All, one of the few albums that really I don't dislike any of the songs on. I love her music a lot. I love her as a vocalist. I love this album as a whole. And I can't wait to see where she goes from here. I know that she's been hinting at her new album a lot on Twitter. I can't wait for it to release. I can't really add much to the conversation since this album's been out for a little while now, but just it's something that appeals to me personally. I really enjoyed it, really had fun with it, and kept coming back to it. So shout outs to Alessia Cara. She's great. Moving right along, another record from an EXO member. We have Belly with Mumble Rap, a mixtape that definitely had little to no mumble rap on it. It was really fun. It was a pleasant surprise. I like Belly's flow and his lyricism throughout a lot of these tracks, and I really hope that after this he continues to rise, because he's actually quite good. I think this mixtape showed that nicely. After that, we have Kelly Clarkson with The Meaning of Life as the first winner of American Idol. If I was a judge, this album would be a yes from me. It's got some incredible vocals, plenty of songs that have some really strong, catchy hooks, and with it, I think she establishes, at least to me, that she can still make it big. Even if her songs aren't going to chart as well these days, her songs are still memorable, fun, and exciting. After that, we have Sam Smith's latest album, The Thrill of It All. A really kind of sad, emotional, but really beautiful album with some really memorable tracks. Another one that I didn't really dislike any of the songs on. And it's far less poppy and much more soft than his last album, but for the better, because it feels more personal and more from the heart. It's definitely much better than his last album, I would say. After that, we have, this is just an EP that I can just shout out real quick. We have young Philly indie R&B artist Shea Moore with her new EP, No Distractions. Far beyond her 17 years of age, she shows some incredible poise on this, with some really solidly produced, really vocally interesting sets of tracks, and I did describe her throughout my review as the next Beyonce/Rihanna. And I stand by that. You know, there are still songs on this thing I still listen to now. I'm just like, I'll walk somewhere with my headphones in and I'll still nod my head and really enjoy a lot of these tracks. They're really great. Definitely give it a look. Getting back to Kendrick, of course, I reviewed Damn this year. I had to look at To Pimp a Butterfly. Definitely a really fantastic album. Great concept, well fleshed out. I love Kendrick's lyricism, his flow throughout a lot of these tracks. They're really emotional, really poignant. And I know I did separate this one from Damn, but it's because I reviewed them at different times of the year. And overall, I did love them both, for sure. After that, we have U2 with Songs of Experience. I know a lot of people weren't all that crazy about this record, but for me, I just had fun listening to it. It was nice on the ears. I think U2 definitely did a solid job modernizing their sound on this record and still sticking to what makes them what they are. I know not a lot of people are going to love it, but me, I had some fun with it. After that, we have Childish Gambino with Awaken My Love. The multi-talented entertainer Donald Glover. Childish Gambino returned with an album that was much different from a lot of his previous projects, but it was really funky, charismatic, and fun and energetic. It was much different. I feel like some people might not enjoy it as much as his older projects, but I loved it. I thought it was great. After that, we have two albums from the same artist. I'll just throw them out there right now. The 1975 with their self-titled debut, and their second album, which has one of the creepiest titles in the world. I Like It When You Sleep, for You Were So Beautiful Yet So Unaware of It. I like watching you sleep, so you should call the cops because I'm a creep. I didn't expect that to rhyme. But, you know, creepy title of that last album aside, it was fun, energetic synth-pop music that really sold me on the band. I liked Matt Healy's vocals, the fun, upbeat, catchy productions, and even the instrumental interludes on these albums sounded amazing. Really enjoyable stuff, and I can't wait for their next EP, which is going to be releasing pretty early in the year. And then last but not least, I would be remiss if I went through all of 2017 without reviewing Lorde's Melodrama, an album that felt really personal, really special, really from the heart, really emotional, really heartbreaking, and just really powerful. It's an album that's really going to stick with me. It had some really fun production, some great instrumental tracks, wonderful vocals from Lorde, some great layered lyrics, and it was an album that I just feel like I'm definitely going to come back to a lot. Okay, so that is finally over. You guys probably might not even notice, but I had to divide this into two separate videos because, wow, I talked for a while and I didn't even want to. I tried to be rapid fire, but I couldn't help but ramble. So that is my final list of 2017. Farewell 2017. Thank you for allowing me to start doing album reviews and start listening to more music. Whoa! But what were the albums that you listened to in 2017? They didn't have to come out this year. What albums did you listen to throughout 2017 that you enjoyed, or what did you listen to that you hated? Just leave your thoughts down in the comment section. Tell me what you thought. If you want to leave a like on this video, you can. Again, I won't force it upon you. If you want to subscribe, welcome. Nice to have you here. If you don't want to, then no biggie. And that's all I've got to say. I'm gonna go sleep now because I was just filming for a really long time and my throat hurts and I am tired. That was a lot. That was a lot of filming for one day. So I'm gonna go to sleep now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace out.